Well, I think it is time to start. Good morning, everybody. It's really good to see you. Good to be here. I am not Roger Bruner, but I will do my best to guide you through this. We'll see what we can understand from this. This is Ecclesiastes. We are not in Ecclesiastes yet, but we're talking about Ecclesiastes. And the goal and focus for today, looking at key terms and things that come up a lot in the book of Ecclesiastes. There are 7 of them. I'm not going to make any promises about how many we talk about. We may do 1, we may do 7, or somewhere in between. But I think there's a lot that we can learn, a lot that we can understand just from looking at the terms that we use. I think it's helpful to think through what the book is about and keep that in mind as we look at some of these key phrases. And a lot of times, when an author uses a certain phrase over and over and over and over and over again, it kind of gives us an idea of where they want to go in the book and what they want to talk about, and helps shape our minds into what we're supposed to be seeing as we go through. So that's where we are right now. We're going to see what we can understand from this. But before we begin, I'm going to ask Sam to lead us in a word of prayer. Amen. Thank you very much. I want to open up with just a sort of a sneak peek. Well, not a sneak peek at all. I want to talk about a verse that Roger wanted us to talk about. He told you guys you have homework. Hopefully you did your homework. We'll see how you did. But in Romans 1, I want you to look at verse 20. Romans 1, verse 20, there were some specific things that were said in this verse. And I want us to think through this and see what this does for us, especially in context of what we're looking at in Ecclesiastes. So in Romans 1, verse 20, somebody care to read that for us real quick?
For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So we have God revealed. How? How is God revealed here? Where is he revealed? I guess I should say.
Nature.
Yeah, in the creation, in nature. We see God through what he has created. Now, this whole idea, the concept of the invisible attributes of God, what do you think that means? Somebody want to take a stab at that?
King James reads a little bit differently. It's a little bit harder
Okay.
to pull that out. But NIV, it says invisible qualities, mainly his eternal power and divine nature. And we're speaking very specifically about his power and his nature.
Okay. How do we see God's power, his characteristics in nature? What sorts of things about God do we learn by looking at creation?
Well, the seasons change, the sun comes up, everything has an order, it's structured, and it's out of our ability to do anything about it.
Yeah, there you go. And I think that's spot on for what we're thinking about here. The order, the design behind this proves what kind of God that we serve. We don't serve a God of confusion, a God who is just randomly throwing stuff out there. No, everything has a purpose, everything has a reason. And when we look at things, we can see that the creator of that must have a purpose, must have a reason. And that tells us something about that. Now, as Roger was pointing out on Wednesday, there are some things about God that we can't know just by looking at nature. God's will, like exactly what does God expect from us? How does he want us to worship him? We can't look at nature and understand that, oh, well, because the leaves fall off the trees, that means we have to be baptized. Like, okay, no, that doesn't do anything for us. We can see God's power and we can see how God interacts with nature, but in order to figure out what God wants from us, we have to look at his revelation. He luckily, and I don't know if we should say luckily, but thankfully, God has blessed us with the ability to have his will, to know what pleases him. It's not like we are just guessing and, hopefully we'll get it right one day. But he tells us specifically, this is what I want. This is how you please me. And that's just awesome. I want to connect this verse with a couple of other passages, because remember, when we're looking at nature, we can see God. We can see that God exists, and that's part of it. We have to realize that God exists, but there's more to it than that. Romans 1, this whole section between verses 18 through 32, is really dealing with people who I think they know God exists. They see that, and they understand that. It wasn't a question of whether or not God is real, but it was a question about whether or not that they were going to do what God says. Because the things that they were doing were not the things that were pleasing to God. Hebrews chapter 1, really like the connection of this verse with what we're thinking about here. Hebrews 1, let's read verses 2 and 3. In these last days, he has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he also made the world. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. He had made purification of sins. He sat down on the right hand of the majesty on high. How do we see what the will of God is? Where do we look? Jesus, yeah. Jesus was the exact representation of his nature. All the things that we didn't understand before, all the things that we didn't know, we saw God's power, we saw his creative abilities, but there were some things that people didn't understand, didn't fully know. But Jesus revealed that to us. In him was the fullness of everything, and we see exactly what we need to know about the Lord to be able to serve him faithfully. Think about passages like Ephesians 3, the first 6 verses of that. Talk about how Paul was saying, there was this mystery and we didn't understand it before, but now it's been revealed to me, so I'm going to tell you and I'm going to share this with you so you can understand what the will of God is. And so, we have a way to figure out what the will of God is. And that's a long way around getting back to what Ecclesiastes is about. We have to understand that, number one, God has the immense creative power to make everything. He has the power to tell us what he wants, and so he has the power to also expect that of us as well. And so when we look at Ecclesiastes, keep that in mind, just that we are looking for ways that we can serve God, that we can be faithful to him on this earth and in our life right now. Anybody have anything about those thoughts, about those verses? Anything you want to mention before we move on? In our lesson material, we're on the bottom of page 5, talking about definitions of terms used in the book. It's really helpful to think through some of these things. Hopefully, there we are. First term that a lot of people think of when they look at the book of Ecclesiastes is the phrase "under the sun." You're going to find that 29 times in that sort of exact wording in the book of Ecclesiastes. But you're also going to have some synonymous phrases like "upon earth" or "upon the earth" or "under heaven." If you count all that, then we have this phrase, this idea expressed 39 times throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, for a book that's 12 chapters long, to have something that's brought up 39 times, that shows us that this is really important to the author. It's something that the author wants us to focus in on, wants us to understand, and something I think we should pay attention to. Now, this is something I want to... Oh, here it is. Yep. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to look at the author's take on this, about his experience, an evaluation of life under the sun, and his conclusions about how we should live based on that. Now, we discussed some about how probably Solomon. I think that we're all probably on the same page there. There's a good chance that it was Solomon. What would make Solomon qualified to talk about this? Why should we listen to what Solomon says? He was wise. Yeah, God granted him that. What else?
He experienced a lot of stuff.
He did. More so than most of anybody ever would experience. I mean, the things that he was able to get his hands on, to be able to do, the amount of time he had to go. I mean, when he was king, it was a pretty peaceful time. So he didn't have to worry about a lot of military conquest because, David took care of a lot of that. He got to experience a lot of stuff. He got to learn a lot of things about a lot of things and spend his time getting a lot of money, doing a lot of, pleasureful things. And he is uniquely qualified. And at this point, I think we take it, he was not a young man. He was probably well experienced in life. And so it's someone that is not only older, wiser, and all of that stuff, but he had a lot of experiences. And if there's anybody that could tell us about what it's like to have a lot of wealth, have a lot of fame, have a lot of whatever, it's him. Because, think about it. What sorts of things do people, even today, Americans, what's the American dream? What do we want? More stuff. We want to amass more. We want more money, more cars, more houses, more properties, more something. Just the key word is more. And we want more, and we keep pushing forward to get more. Solomon had that. He had more. He had the most of really anybody. It's a good idea to see what he says about this so we can sort of go from there. And these are the 2 points we should be looking at. So looking at his evaluation of life under the sun, and look and see what he has to say, his conclusions about the best way to live life. So that's where we are with that. Now, this idea here, he who serves God today not only has the hope of eternity with God in heaven, but he also has the very best this life has to offer because he's letting God plan his life. That is an interesting statement there. Because I think sometimes what happens is people, and sometimes people within the church, but a lot of times, especially outsiders, people looking at church people, what they say is, you're just a group of people, all you do is you sit around and wait for heaven. Like that's all you're doing. You're just, I'm a Christian now, so I'm just going to sit here and wait for heaven to come. I can't wait. This life is terrible, and you're just going to die, and this is awful. So just push through, grit your teeth, you'll get through. But then there's heaven. That's not at all what the author of Ecclesiastes wants us to see. I think he's showing us that there's a little bit more. Is the purpose of this life just to survive? Well, you're not going to survive, obviously. But are you just trying to wait for heaven? I think there's some things that we're expected to do here while we are alive. And this, I got to tell you, I was guilty of this type of thinking for a really long time. And I was just in my mind, it was like, okay, I'm going to make sure that I come to worship, that I study the Bible, going to read that and just make it through, the whole Monday through Saturday type thing. We'll make it through there, but can't wait for heaven. And that's probably not how we should look at it. And that leads to things like the checklist mentality of Christianity and that sort of thing. We have a purpose. We have things that we need to do. And here's that, thinking about that. What makes life of value here on the earth? Is there value to life here on the earth? Is there a purpose? Do we have something that we can do? Why am I here? What should I pursue as my primary goal? These types of things, this idea of looking at what are we here for? What is our purpose? That's why we have the book of Ecclesiastes. And I don't know how you guys have experienced this, if you've had conversations with people about this, because a lot of people will say, okay, well, what's the point? What do we, life is terrible and then you die. That's pretty much it. Why are we here? What is the purpose? What are we here for? I think the book of Ecclesiastes is written in some parts, at least, to tell us that and to express that. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure.
Service. How so?
It could be in all directions.
Yeah.
Help somebody that's ill. You could go visit somebody that's lonely. And you could just go all around. And you probably have an opportunity to say something nice to somebody we hadn't spoke to a long time in the next 15 minutes.
That's a really good point.
30 minutes.
Yeah, right. No, and that's a really good point. You think about service. How many opportunities are there to do good for others, to see the needs in other people's lives and step in and to be helpful, to be an example? I think that's a huge part of it. What else do you guys think?
I think what you said, life in the flesh is no fun, so we want to wait for heaven. But whenever we're diligent in seeking the kingdom and doing the things that we're supposed to do that's outlined by God's will, it allows us to get a taste of heaven here on earth, and it makes those days in the flesh much more tolerable. It gives us things to look forward to when we gather ourselves together even outside of this building.
Yeah.
Whenever, like Wendell said, we serve, when we see the results of that service, it gives us a taste, just a glimmer of what heaven will be in eternity, making these days more tolerable.
I like what you said about that, making these days more tolerable. Because everybody's going to experience some negative things, some things that are hard, difficult to go through, whatever. How do you deal with that? If you're someone who doesn't have God in your life and there's no hope for something to come later, then isn't it kind of pointless? Like, how do you get through those tough times? Why not just give up? Because if there's nothing greater, then what's the point of even doing anything? But when we have hope, when we have a thought of something to come that's greater, then it makes even the terrible things tolerable. And it helps us to have a little bit of hope, a little bit of, just ability to go through unpleasant things as well. And to still be content and even happy. You ever known anybody who is just like the most grumpy Christian ever? It's like, I don't even remember where I was, what the situation was, but there was somebody who I had invited to come to worship service. This was 10, 20, I don't know. It's been a while. And it wasn't here. It was somewhere else. And I invited someone to come, and then they saw someone else. It was like, I used to work at a fast food restaurant, and this person would come in all the time. And I would never have guessed they were a Christian because they were just so grumpy and angry all the time. It's like, is that how we want to be perceived? Like just being the grumpy cat? We don't want to be the one who people look at as just like, ooh, kind of sour attitude. Because that's what it can turn into if we don't look at this life as an opportunity to do God's will, to be an influence on other people and to help out with others. When we start living life for God and for others, that really helps us to have a good attitude and be able to get through the things in life. Because no matter what, you're going to have to do some things that are hard. Like that's life. You're going to have to. Your attitude on that will determine how you get through that and what that experience is going to be like. And if we're keeping proper perspective of things, it's going to help, even right here, right now. And so we do have some things in this life that we can do, and I think being a Christian and having a good attitude about it will help a lot. So Ecclesiastes, this is good stuff. What else? Anything else you want to say about that?
Certainly, sharing the gospel with others is one of the primary purposes of being a Christian. Somebody sharing it with you, so you share it with others, and it just keeps multiplying.
It does, and that's a really good point. And when we think about the importance of sharing the gospel with others, I think you guys know where I stand on that. But it is a really important thing to do. There was a book, and actually, to be honest with you, I never read the book, but I just saw at a bookstore one time, just on the shelf, and I did look at the back of the book too. So there was that. But the title of the book was like "The One Thing You Can't Do in Heaven." And I was like, what is that? That's weird. And so I looked on the back of the book, and it was talking about evangelism. It's talking about sharing the gospel with other people. Because who are you going to share the gospel with when you're in heaven? Like, everybody already knows. Like, that's who's in heaven. So while we're here on the earth, that's our job. And, if God has blessed us with one more day on the earth, maybe take advantage of that. And maybe try to be an influence, be an example, share the gospel with people. And so that's something to consider as well. Because if we're in this mindset of, I'm just waiting for heaven, I'm just, coasting out my life, I'm doing my things, doing whatever, and then eventually I'll be able to get to heaven and get my reward. It's very self-centered. It's very self-focused. And I don't think that's what God expects of us. I think He wants us to be not so self-centric, but He wants us to look out and see what other people need. So really good thoughts there. Good stuff.
Jason, just to your point about you made a minute ago, hopefully our purpose is people seeing glimpses of Jesus in us each and every day, even on our bad days. It's easy to be a light and be jovial when things are going great, but when things are going bad, to Brian's point, it's a little more difficult. We are who we say we are. We got to be showing glimpses of Christ each and every day, in every situation.
Right. That's a really good point. And that's when it's really hard. Because, you're not going to be just happy about the terrible things that are going. You're not just going to be like, whoa, look at how many terrible things are happening. Yay. Like, that's ridiculous. No, you're not going to do that. But there are ways we can handle things that are a little bit better than how some people in the world handle things. When things get tough, are we just complaining about everything, saying how terrible our life is, how terrible our experience is, how terrible our boss is, how terrible, just whatever that we're going through? Why do I have to do this? This isn't my job, and all this stuff. One of the people in my life that has been the absolute best example for me of how to be better about that is my dad. He's someone that I just really look up to and respect because he was a coal miner for a long time, and he told me that some of the things that he did in the coal mines, especially when he was first starting, is they would have these jobs that were just awful, dirty, nobody wanted to do, and when they asked for him to do it, he's like, yeah, I'll do it. And then he'd be like whistling as he's going along doing that, and people were like, what's wrong with you? Like, how could you do that? This is an awful job. Like, do you like it? He said, well, no, not really, but might as well have a good attitude about it because, what's good being miserable going to do? It's going to make it feel longer. And so that sort of attitude and mentality is really good because that's led him to have a lot of opportunities to talk to people because people are like, what? There's something different about you. Well, first they might say there's something wrong with you. Definitely I've heard that. But it's really good to be able to have those opportunities when we're able to get through the hard times. And it's really encouraging to be, and just think about, as a Christian, when you see other Christians complaining about things, how does that make you feel? And, but when you see another Christian, having a good attitude about it, getting through it, even though it's hard and there might be difficulties, there might be even tears involved. But when they have a good attitude and it's God's been good to me, I know He'll get me through this. Like that sort of thing, it's really impressive. And it's been helpful to me to see that sort of thing. So, good points. Anything else on that? So there's a lot of wisdom that we can get from just thinking about what life is under the sun, what that looks like, what we are supposed to do, our purpose, and our goals here. And really it's a shift of focus. It's a shift of mindset. And because when you think about it, there are certain things in life you have to do. And depending on where you are in your station in life, maybe you're going to a job every day. Maybe you have some type of work that you're doing there. That's something that you got to do. Maybe that's not you. Maybe there's some other things that you're involved in, and your life looks different. There's still things that you have to do just to exist as a human being. It's not that Christians have found some kind of like magic recipe of how to make things easier. It's just, hopefully, we have a mindset of the way that we handle the things we have to do in our daily lives. Going to work, or waking up, or doing laundry, or cooking food, or doing dishes. That's my favorite. But it's not really. But yeah. Just getting through that stuff. How do we do that? What's our mentality? What's our outlook? Well, let's keep it in the right perspective and think about it like that. All right, so really, the author here, he tells us, it's interesting because we see not only the conclusion, and everybody knows the conclusion, the end of the book, what the purpose of life is, but he walks us through how he arrived at that decision. Because I think sometimes it's easy to say things like, yeah, okay, I understand. We have to fear God and keep his commandments. All right, good. But why? Why do we do that? Why is that important? Why is that the best way to live? And throughout the book, he pushes us towards that and shows us if we rely only things found in this life for meaning, it's all worthless. There's no profit. And there it is. The only way man can be happy on this earth is to choose to live as God prescribes. And I think that's the conclusion that we would all say that, but I hope that our life reflects that as well. Sometimes I think we just get so caught up and focused on their daily lives that you lose sight of it. And we need these reminders. We need to be brought back down to think about what's important. And that verse there, Matthew 16:26, Jesus says, "For what good will it do a person if he gains the whole world but forfeits his soul? Or what will a person give in exchange for his soul?" I mean, there it is. You know, even if we work our entire lives and gain the whole world or, you know, the universe, or we're captain of the Milky Way galaxy, it doesn't matter. Like, whatever that we accomplish here, you know, can you exchange that for your soul? Like, when we die, what good is that going to do you? Absolutely nothing. All right. Anything else on life under the sun? That word, that term. Speaking of life under the sun, words that Solomon, or the author, uses a lot. Vanity. Or futility. That's the second word that he uses. And when you think about vanity, futility, what is vanity or futility? What does that mean? Useless, yeah. Yeah, it's just something that has no ultimate goal, no purpose. It's something, you know, you do something over and over, and it turns out to be something that is unsatisfactory, that in the end results in nothing real that was accomplished. Some of the Old and I don't know where Roger got these. I'll take his word for it. These are pretty good. But the Old Testament definitions, you see a lot of emptiness. Something unsatisfactory. New Testament, emptiness as to results, what is devoid of truth and appropriateness. So things that ultimately don't get you the results that are going to last. Anything that is worthwhile, anything helpful. Now, that first one, part A of the creation, there's a couple of passages there. Somebody would just want to tell me, in Genesis 3, 17 through 19, this is where God is talking to Adam after the sin. What's going on there? What kind of curse does God give Adam? The sweat of the brow. You know, you're going to work, and you have to work to get your food, and there's going to be like thorns, thistles, all these weeds and stuff. You're going to have to just work really hard to be able to eat, and that's it. What caused that to happen? Why was that the result? What did Adam do? He sinned. So this futility, this vanity, that constantly having to have sweat of your brow, the work, that came because of sin. So when you think about why is this life so futile? Why is there so much vanity in life? Why is there so much emptiness? It's because of sin. Like that's where it came from. And that's why there's so many. Now, a lot of us, some of you may work in the garden, and you might do that, and you might go out, and you might raise all your food that way. Is there ever a point that you could say, you know what, I went out there, I got all the weeds, I am set for life. I'm good. Like, it's going to just be taking care of itself from this point on. Yeah, a lot of people laugh at. No, you can't do that. Because there's always going to be work involved. There's always something. Now, you might not be experiencing that, but remember what I said before about like dishes and laundry? Are you ever done with laundry? No.
Oh, you worm.
Exactly. You gotta keep wearing them. You gotta keep living. You're never done with dishes. You're never done, cooking your food, because constantly you always have to go back and you have to do something. There's this aspect of life, and we have the daily grind. You know what I mean? It's just like you get up, you have to eat, and then you do whatever, and you have all of these things that are required just to live life as a human being on the earth. And there's this daily grind. You got to keep doing this. And no matter how much you do one day, you're still going to have to do it the next day too. And there's still always going to be something that you're doing. And you think about why? What's the point of that? Is there a way to make this easier? In all actuality, no. I mean, you can't, because this is part of the consequence for Adam's sin. So the futility that we experience, and this is on sort of a mundane level of things that we all experience, and I guess dishes, laundry, all that stuff's not like super important, but it's stuff that we need to do just to maintain our being, and that sort of thing. But because of Adam's sin and because of that situation, we're always going to be doing something that ultimately feels like it's never ending. I'm not really making any progress here. I'm just going as fast as I can to stay in the same spot. And that's sort of what the feeling there. And that's life under the sun. There it is. That is like the definition of vanity. So if you ever feel like you're just in a rut and it's like I'm doing the same things over and over and I'm not getting anywhere, I can't go anywhere, that's life. That's what we experience. That is vanity, that is futility. And maybe that's a lesson from God to show us, life shouldn't be about what's here on this earth, because it's always going to be like that. It should be with something else in mind, something that's not so vain or futile or empty. But sin has led to that, and that's why we're experiencing that. So we have that. Let's look at Romans chapter 8. Romans 8, would someone care to just jump in and read verses 20 through 22?
For the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who hath subjected the same to hope. Because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption to the glorious liberty of the children of God. We know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now.
Awesome. Thank you. So again, if we think about why the creation was subject to futility, sin. I mean, that's why. That's how that ended up happening. Now, who was it that subjected creation to futility? Who was it? Who's in charge of all that? Yeah, it's God. God is the one who is in charge of dishing out the punishment for what we deserve there. But it's also God who is in charge of the solution as well. There's a word that's used there. In verse 20, he subjected it in hope. What is their hope for? What is our hope?
Heaven be our home.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. We have this desire, this longing for something greater. And I think this is great that God has seen fit to show us the futility of this world, of this life, of the things that are here, and what sin ultimately brings, which is just this whole cycle of futility. But then we look forward to something that is actually lasting, that actually has roots in eternity, that something that can be overall worthwhile. And the purpose of life, the things that we experience, there is something greater that we can, attain, and which is really cool. And so when we are looking at that hope, we're looking at being freed from slavery, freed from sin, freed from that bondage, so we can serve God, and so we can, have something to hold on to. And it's all through, as Roger would keep pointing out, obedience. I mean, that's how we get that. right? It's not like we just accidentally, randomly walk into that hope, to freedom from sin, freedom from slavery. No, we have to do that on purpose. We have to make that our purpose and our goal in life to reach forward to something greater. And that's by obeying the will of God that He's revealed to us. And there it is. All right, and part B talks about some vanity of the mind that governs the manner of life of the Gentiles. And there in Ephesians 4:17 and Romans 1:21. You know what it was that people involved themselves in that God calls futility? What sorts of things did they do?
He's just talking about the fleshly things, sins of the flesh, getting into that.
Yeah, so you think about that. The sins of the flesh. Are the sins of the flesh ever fully satisfied? No. Like, you give in to a sin of the flesh, what are you going to want the next day? More. And you give into that, and what are you going to want after that? You're just going to want more. And then after that, you're just going to want more. And actually what happens is the more that you indulge in those sins, the more you want. And the more you feel you need to be satisfied. But it's just this never-ending cycle of being unsatisfied because things of the flesh don't offer ultimate satisfaction. And the devil tries to make it seem like there is satisfaction, that you can ultimately get what you want out of things. But no, you can't. You can't. People have tried that, and it doesn't work. There's this never-ending hunger. I mean, I think one thing God has blessed us with is hunger, the desire to eat food. If you eat all the food that you ever want in one day, what are you going to want the next day? More food. Yeah. You're never going to eat so much that it's just like, okay, I'm good. I'm good forever. That's not how it works. God, I think in His wisdom has put some things in our lives to make us realize you cannot take care of everything you need by yourself. That's ultimately going to be futility, vanity. You're never going to quite get there. Okay, there's that one. So we have this concept of futility in the things that we pursue in life, sinful things. We have in Romans 1, there was a lot of sinful activities that they went after, the things that they desired. And when we pursue our desires, and if the things in our lives that are the most important are the desires, the things that we want, the things that we want to do and experience, then that's not going to end up very well for us. Overall, it's going to be vanity. It's going to be striving after the wind. It's going to be just going after things that are not helpful and that do not ultimately satisfy. So there's that. And then the last one there, part C, the great swelling words from false teachers. False teachers, no matter what you want to believe in life, there are false teachers who will tell you those things. And if you really want to pursue something, you'll find somebody who teaches you that you can. And that's what you can do. But ultimately, you're not going to find true wisdom there. You're not going to find true happiness, joy, whatever, because that's not where the false teachers get their information from. They don't have this wisdom of God that we have. Okay, anything on that right there? How about this? Psalm 127, verse 1. Psalm 127, verse 1. Somebody can read that when you get there, if you don't care.
Song of Ascents of Solomon. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain.
Okay, so what's futile there in that verse? What?
Labor without Lord.
No, okay, there you go. Yeah, when you try to do stuff without God behind it. And, if you think about it, you look at verse 1 and you compare it to verse 2. Verse 2, it's vain to rise up early, to retire late, to eat the bread of painful labors, for he gives to his beloved even in his sleep. God can provide what you need, however he wants. If your life is so focused on, I need to work to make more money, and I'll do the whole like religion thing later, but I just really want to work for this. Do you know how easy that can be taken away? Do you know how easy it is to lose everything that you earn? Because you think I've stockpiled, I've stored up for myself, but you're laboring in vain if you are trusting in yourself. The only one who can truly satisfy, the only one who can truly give what we need is the Lord. And if we're not building our house on Him, if we're not guarding the city with Him, it doesn't matter if you rise up early, you stay out late, you work all day. If God's not involved, it's worthless. It's not going to get you anywhere. That second passage there, 1 Corinthians 15:14. Chapter 15 of 1 Corinthians is all about the resurrection and what that means for us. Specifically in verse 14, talks about if Christ was not raised, then what's true about that? What is? Yeah. It's a waste of time. If Christ wasn't raised from the dead, then life is vain, your faith is vain, nothing matters because, Christ is the sacrifice. If it wasn't for Christ, we would have no hope. Nobody at any time of human history would have hope because He is the one that allows us to have that connection with Him. And so, if He wasn't raised from the dead, then your enjoyment in life is just get whatever you can out of life, and that's it. Like you can't do much else other than that. Again, what's the point of life if it wasn't for Christ? So, flip side of that, think about what does that mean about the resurrection of Christ? It means that should be what we live our life for. We need to have the resurrection of Christ on our mind more often. Now, I think this is something we totally shortchange the gospel sometimes because we don't think about that enough. Don't think about Christ resurrected and Him. I mean, you know what almost every gospel sermon in the book of Acts it either starts out with or it involves? Resurrection of Christ. And that's what the power of the gospel is, that Christ was raised and that because of that we have hope, we have comfort, and we have something to look forward to. Well, I got through 1.5 of them, so I'll let Roger know where we got. And I think he'll pick up, Lord willing, Wednesday.